Hello everybody and welcome. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar on data quality. My name is Ricarda and I am the sales manager for the DACH region here at Inspire, and I will also be the moderator for the session today. Just to give you a short information, who is Inspire? Inspire is a software manufacturer from Cologne, and we are specialized in creating applications and providing enterprise architecture solutions on the ServiceNow platform. But today we won't give you a tool demonstration. Today we would like to talk to you about personal experiences and best practices on data quality. And therefore I have Kadir Özbayram, the Senior Partner of Inspire, joining me virtually today. Welcome, Kadir, to this session.
Thank you.
But before we get started, I really would like to do some basic housekeeping for the session. So during the webinar, everyone will be on mute. But please don't shy away from the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. And if the time allows, we will be answering some of your questions live at the end of the webinar. And if not, we will definitely get back to you via email so very soon. Just one more information: at the end of the webinar, there will be a survey. And if you join that survey, we will send you the slide decks from today. So also I would like to say a big thank you to Philip from Sofa Summit. Sofa Summit is sponsoring our webinar today. And with that, I would really like to hand it over to Kadir to share some experiences and best practices on data quality.
Thanks very much, Ricarda. So I'm thrilled to be today here and talk a little bit about my personal experiences. We did a poll recently. So our marketing team asked on LinkedIn. I think there were close to 150 people which gave a feedback about the topic. What are the biggest challenges for you when ensuring high data quality? And it looks like implementing stewardship, scoping relevant data, and a good solution for maintaining data are the top ratings here, which we received through that poll. And there are a couple of things we want to address today. And by the way, it looks very good today. We have a lot of participants. It's close to 500 participants here. So let's see. Hopefully, it will be a good show today. So if you have any questions, just address them. So we will take the time to answer them. And as Ricarda said, if that will not happen, then we will follow up with you. Today's goal to set expectations is to understand the need of the value-based data collection by establishing a sustainable stewardship practice to maintain the crucial data current, complete, and correct. So we will start with the purpose, the questions, then see what's all about establishing a practice for data collection to drive good outcome, business value. To do that, guys, I want to tell you a little bit of story about myself, because this is Kadir, in 2001, an IT manager. I don't have an IT background. I have a research background. I worked for a big chemical healthcare company. And then started in a central research department, researching on nanoparticles, moved into IT in 2001. And the first job I got was as an IT manager is to improve asset management. So it was around 450 end users, 600 plus devices, including everything from the server, from the network backbone, including, third level and all the applications with the robots and so on. So it was pretty exciting. And you see, I'm so motivated that I don't even see, a punch coming into my face. I'm still happy. So I'm very eager to do a good job. And my first challenge in IT was basically the asset management challenge. So what happened? So I asked my boss, or he asked me basically, I said, look, get a grip on asset management. And I said, okay, do we have already something documented? He said, yeah, I will send you an Excel spreadsheet. And that had just 20 lines, a couple of fields and not really completed. So I took that one and said, how can I crack this? And I said, okay, it's 3 buildings. So let's start at the basement. And I took, an Excel spreadsheet with me, and I went from room to room, and I started in a laboratory area. In a laboratory, we had robots, we had different measurement devices and the computers. And I started to, write them down. This is here floor 1, it's this room, and those are the computers, including the IP addresses and the computer name and so on. So it took me a couple of minutes to finish the job. There was not that much. And then next to the laboratory, there was an office area. And then I went to the office and started, from the beginning to the end of the floor, capturing, doing the exact job again. And suddenly I saw a guy, I will not forget his name, his name was Peter. So Peter was basically carrying a computer from the laboratory area into the office area. And I'm fresh, very energetic. I said, hey, what are you doing there? And Peter said, well, the project has ended and I don't need that computer there anymore. And I'm moving it into the, working area. I don't need it in the laboratory. I said, you're not allowed to do that. He looked at me and said, who says that? I said, I'm saying that as IT. He said, I don't care. We paid this computer. I can do whatever I want to do here at work with it. So at that moment, I realized that my intention to improve asset management, that challenge wasn't that easy. So there were a lot of challenges, not only that the data was, outdating while I'm trying to capture it. The problem overall as a challenge was not having the assets under control. We couldn't support them. We didn't know what devices exist because people are constantly changing. There were operational outages with outdated hardware. Then we had budget planning disputes, and so we didn't know, what to bring in. So that was a big, interesting exercise for me. The end of that story is that I created a solution which popped up basically during the lock-in process, which asked exactly for 10 essential information, and that came up every 90 days to make a review. Then another challenge hit me. Application rationalization example. In 2008, a CIO, Matthias, at that time came and said, look, Kadir, we have a project here with a very famous known consultancy company, and said, we need to reduce some cost. Here is the budget, here is the project, here is the consultancy group. Make sure we can identify the top applications so we can rationalize. So what happened at that time, we were preparing our APM project to implement it. I said, look, give me 6 months, then we can do it without the consultancy company. He said, no, we don't have time, do it. And then we used their methodology. We collected all that data around the world. And, it's Murphy's Law. What happened is we identified that, or the consultancy company did it. And then we presented that to the executive level, to the C-level. And they said, very, proud, the consultant said, here are the cost savings. This is X million we can save, and so on. Here are top 20 applications. And then the management started challenging that data. They said, look, that application we shut down already last year, it doesn't exist. Another executive member came in and said, look, that cost for that application is not correct. And then they trusted not trusting that data. And I saw the first time a consultant and from a famous company, right, changing color from red to purple. It was funny on the one hand. On the other hand, it was very, very interesting to see as well, the data quality, the full project. That was just blind, because collecting the data, harmonizing that. What happened? Latin America, they just sent me a sheet from last year. The same with Asia Pacific, the same with the US. There were just a few people who used our template. They just sent something over the fence. So doing that job on an Excel spreadsheet, that was, just a nightmare. And we have been like in the forest, completely blind, having no chance. The data quality was bad, and the management couldn't do any decision based on that data which we collected and proposed as a solution. So, but before we continue, enough stories. There are more stories, war stories I can tell you. So let's have a look to the definition when we talk about data quality today, right? So we have a common understanding. So we define as Inspire data quality as the measure of how well required data fits a purpose. To do what? To deliver business value to the stakeholders. So that means we have a purpose. There is a need. There is a requirement. There is a demand, whatever you call it. Let's call it purpose, or a question, a business question we have. And answering that will deliver some business value, because there will be people doing some decisioning, some exercises on that data to provide that value. It could be a transformation, a change, something, which makes sense. So let's call the purpose piece crucial, because there is a cruciality, there is an urgent need. So the data we will collect there for that purpose is crucial to deliver business value. So then that data we have identified being crucial to generate those reports, those dashboards, which will then be insight for the business stakeholders or to deliver business value, we have to complete that data. So if we need the name, the cost, the criticality, all that information needs to be completed by somebody. And we will talk about that in a second. That needs to be completed so we know there is data there. But going back to the example I brought in, just having the data doesn't mean anything. We need to make sure that the data is current, that it is updated as well. Otherwise, we don't know, is the application still there? Is the life cycle still there, or is it obsolete? Or is the risk still there? Maybe it's not used as intended before. And the last C is, so with that we have the C4 concept, is the data needs to be correct. It doesn't help me if the cost is not correct, right? Or if the information which is provided is correct, because the data is that good. How for my decisioning, I need good data so I can make a good decision based on that. Hope that makes sense. There are a lot of things in between, urgency, the data needs to be defined, uniqueness, consistency, validity, and so on. In the end, whatever we need to do in that process to deliver value, you should always keep in mind, it should be outcome-based decisioning, right? So the purpose and the outcome we are looking for should be aligned in that sense. So, and what I have experienced in my life the last decades, and I'm getting old as well. You have seen the pictures and how I look now. You're getting older, you can call it seniority, but some stuff doesn't change, and that data quality challenge hasn't really changed over the times. I see that with every company, having the same problem. So the biggest challenge is, even if you have the completed data, the value contribution that data will provide is not that big. As said, my task was just to complete a list of assets, create a list of assets and complete that data. And that had no value because it was not up to date. It was directly changing. So completing, reviewing the data makes a higher value, but then having that correct data, verifying that will propose the highest value. So lessons learned, number one for today is, if there is no purpose, there is no value. And I think if you take that really as your starting point, because I see a lot of organizations as well collecting just for the sake of collecting data, creating like a staging DB with all the data IT has, dropping that into the EA tool, that doesn't provide any value. We need to know what data is requested or by whom, what's the purpose and what's the value we're looking for. So let's exercise it a little bit. I will try to make that fast to really explicitly demonstrate really the need. Most of you know that it's the obvious one, but I thought in this webinar, it looks like we're making a 2 to 3 series of this webinar. I just want to cover the basics so there is no doubts about that. So first of all, we define the required data. I said there is a requirement, and imagine the stakeholder requirement is to reduce 20% the operational expenses by end of next year. So if that is the task, and say, look, Kadir, make sure we rationalize our application landscape and save 20% of the cost. So what will we do? Of course, we will identify the portfolio we want to look into. We could as well do it on resources. It's very simple for organizations, just firing people, but that's not really what we want to do. We want to optimize the IT landscape because, IT mostly is running as a business itself, completely detached from the real business, which should not be really the case at all anyway, but that's a different problem. So we will go in and say, okay, it's the application. We need probably a name. The description may be right, but we need a cost information, the functional usage, what capabilities it provides, and so there will be some data we will define. The next thing is we will go in and make sure that for all those applications within our scope, we have that data. And again, if we drop in those Excel, copy, paste, do our pivot tables, whatever, trust me, the data will not be completed with an approach like that. And then what we did in my example as well, we provided that to the stakeholders. They did their analysis, said, aha, let's look into the data. And they tried to make some decision and said, oh, let's go to the left or this side, you know. The problem is the perceived value out of that exercise is none too very, very low. And that's really danger, just to collect data, just do a questionnaire, a survey, just collect that, you know, once a while or initially. That doesn't provide much value. You can do it still, though, for a one-time exercise with not that urgent scope. You could do that. But the problem is that the reaction of the stakeholders, and really I have seen that, you know, people are just rolling their eyes or saying, come on, right? Or, you know, trying to fight you. You're losing the full trust if you're coming up with an approach like that. So just having data that has no value. And remember always the story with changing the color. That's one way, changing the color. But if you have really that pressure in a C-level room, guys, in a boardroom, you don't want to mess it up. It looks in the end like that. You feel really like shit after going out of that room. So just having data has no value. We need a little bit more. So first of all, focus on completing the data. So the next thing is to achieve the current data is we will update the collected data. So we'll have a basis. Our basis will always talk about the data we have defined. We will not add more. We will just focus on the scope we have done. And then ask the people to update that and say, is that information still valid, right? So that will bring you quickly to medium to high value. So, which is awesome. But keep in mind, again, the data will outdate again during your collection process. So if, you know, like moving the computer from one room to another, I was just there 5 minutes ago, but boom, the data has changed. So we need a process to manage that. The last thing we need to do is to make sure the data is correct as well. So that means we need a mechanism that people go in and say, I'm verifying that. So that is cool. That could be done by one person or by a group of people. When we will talk about the stewardship enablement, we will see that. So that is the highest value of the data you are collecting. It needs to be correct. Otherwise, don't show it at all. You know, there will be people in the organization who knows everything and they will just kill your argumentation. So lessons learned number 4 for me was regularly reviewed and verified data has high value. So the asset man showed us we achieved the data quality of 96% within the first 6 to 9 months. So that was awesome. Nobody knew that. And then we extended that over time. But let's have a look to the process. How can we achieve that? So the crucial data, we know that's part basically of our business question. That's our purpose. That's where the first C is coming. And through data collection, we are enabling an engine where we collect that data over time to provide value. So let's see. When we have the purpose, the CIO comes to your room, your manager comes into your room and says, look, I want to do the cost saving by end of the year. So there is a data requisite. You got it. We discussed about that. And then when I look for the OPEX, and there was a thing as well and said, shall we go really for the 6,500 business apps we have in the portfolio, which we didn't know at that time because we didn't have one catalog of data. Or shall we open up as well the bucket with 100,000 Lotus Notes databases at that time, or SharePoint sites, whatever you have. So that means you have to scope that data. But scoping means something else as well, and I will show you as well. But the data requisite is very key. It's, you know, what object types do we need? You know, we need capabilities, processes, information objects, you know, applications, whatever we need is the basis for you to derive the meta model. That's another story, guys, because we completely messed it up initially setting up and introducing EA in our organization in 2008, because we created the meta model. And, you know, vendors are coming and saying, yo, this is the best practice. This is your common services data model. You have to stick and be aligned with this. The reality is, otherwise the solution will break. It will not work. This is why the vendors are praising that. Don't get me wrong, there are good standards like TOGAF, and you can get inspired by that, but just being compliant with the meta model doesn't provide any value. And that is another lessons learned, right? So the data requisite and the meta model, you will derive based on your purpose, on your need, what data I need. And you will just focus on that. As long as nobody is asking for, a pattern, a business service, you don't have to collect that information. It's, you should not collect the things which are so obvious for you, but nobody needs them to make decisions. So then we will enable the stewards, because now we have a scope. We know what data we need for what scope of information. Then we will collect the data, and we will publish that and make that available to our stakeholders for decisioning. But still, we have to review it, because if somebody comes in and say, we have to identify all GDPR relevant informations, right? Is there any data? Are there any systems using data and providing that outside of the European Union, blah, blah, blah. That may be valid for today, but next year, maybe nobody cares, right? There will be some campaigns you have to start to collect some data. So that is very important to keep in mind, that once you start collecting, it will provide the value, but then review and challenge it if the purpose is still there. Otherwise, you're adding data on top of the data, which would be another lessons learned again, right? So to have too much data in your portfolio, which is then so hard to manage. So anyway, another lesson learned was meta model by itself has no value. And honestly, the meta model doesn't care anyone in the business. They just want to see the outcome. The meta model is something for you in the backend, to facilitate the complexity and understand the interdependencies. So it was similar like that. You're an architect, you follow all the standards, and suddenly you're getting, hit by this reality, and you're going basically on your knees and say, man, how can we deal with that? What are we doing wrong, right? Everyone promised me so much. It should work, but it doesn't work for some reason. Let's have a look into the data over time. And this is something nobody is telling you as well, because if you look, the application is always a good example, though defining an application is another challenge. So if we imagine we don't have an app, we want to introduce a new application, and there is a conceptual phase of that. And there is a data requirement. So while you're doing your concept and your planning and your scenario planning and your architecture governance and all the stuff you need to do, there will be some fields you need to define. So what's the expected name? Where do we want to use it? Who will be the owner of the application? There are a couple of data requirements you will define at that stage, but you will not go in and say, what is the final, cost? What is the final number of users? You don't know. And even maybe the description, you don't know. And if you ask for that information at that stage, you will get in crap. And then it's, again, shit in, shit out, right? So you need to understand at every stage of your life cycle, there will be different data. So this will increase to a certain degree. For the planning purpose, you will need some data. But once you are in production, some planning data will be obsolete. You don't need that. You will drop that information. So it doesn't make sense to ask for that data, which was just relevant in your planning cycle. So you see now the complexity. It's a multi-level, multi-matrix complexity here. So once we have the purpose to achieve something, there is a data set, but even within that data set, there is a life cycle, which depends on the life cycle stages of the content you are examining. And even in this productive phase, there will be information which will change. There will be new things we will add. Once an application 3 years old, you will do other assessments, you will do other views on the data. So that needs to be collected. There will new compliance requirements, new IT security requirements, you will just add on top of that. And when you're going into expiring, there's again, which application is the successor, when is the decommissioning plan, and so on and so on. And some other information you will stop collecting because you will shut this down in 6 months. I'm skipping the exceptional piece. And then once it's obsolete, still there is need for data. Where is the archive? Is it really, decommissioned, blah, blah, blah. There will be additional information you need to manage. So, and if we look back to our process to success, chart here, what's missing now is the life cycle piece. That is something we need to add to make the full cycle in our process successful. So keep in mind, it is, I'm talking here inside out. It's my personal experiences. It's the top 10 lessons learned I have envisioned here in my journey is the data requirements are changing over time because of the life cycle of the elements, because at every stage, there will be data. It doesn't make sense to collect them in a planning cycle, but it makes sense when you're in production. And again, it doesn't make sense when something is expiring. So it is the balance you need to consider. Otherwise, it will be hard for people to collect the data. And that brings us to the scoping piece. There is data let's add another dimension into our metrics, yeah? So there is easy data to collect. It's the obvious data, it's existing, it exists in some systems or Excel spreadsheets, or it's already instantly available, manufacturer life cycle, blah, blah, blah. It's the commonly used and known information. Or it's the data where the collection effort doesn't take you longer than 5 minutes. So that is something you should focus on, you should bring in as long as there is a purpose. Then you have the medium collection. I would say it's the effort people need to put in, which takes probably between 5 to 30 minutes. So that is something you will bring in because that's the critical information which is not available today, but it should be in the heads of the people. So with little research and some phone calls, you will be able to get that information. And that is something you want to hunt. The hard one is something sometimes you need to go back and forth with your stakeholders and say, I know, that we want to do rationalization, but we can't get the cost information because our financial system doesn't have that granularity we need to get that data. So the best thing maybe is just to ask people to make a rating about a range and say, it's between 0 and 100K, or, it's between 100 and 1 million, so that you have some ranges and do some estimations there where the cost could be. So, and sometimes there is some definitions, they're so exotic, it really doesn't make sense. It is industry specific and it's just within a business unit. It is very hard to get that for the other business units. So you need to be aware of that. So that information you need to narrow down by the organization or the function. So that's another way of scoping it. Problem with the hard data is it will take you longer than 30 minutes, and that could really break the neck of the success. So this is something you need to really keep in balance. How much can I provide the people to still make some good assessments, analysis, and decisions based on the data we're giving them, versus not being able to collect anything and not being able to provide any decision basis for the stakeholders. It's a compromise. It's very hard in the beginning, but once you are up and running, the first 12 months, so the data collection exercise becomes much more manageable. So let me show you another trick. And that's, again, while I was creating those slides, I said, look, this is really, we did that instinctively, but I haven't seen something or an advice like this anywhere, right? So it's the iteration of the scope. So the axis on the left side is, the data quality, and we have as the x-axis the time. When you start your first iteration, collecting the data, let's assume you're starting from scratch, you don't have anything, you're bringing in the data, and the first iteration you have will stop there, okay? So that's the timeline you will take. It's a week, a month, whatever that is. I don't want to go too much into detail. So now, then you're starting the second iteration. So you see, it will take, every iteration of data collection will take some time. The trick here is that before you go into the second iteration, and every iteration will add additional data on top of your collection once the basis is established, right? This drop you are doing from the first iteration to the second iteration, that fall, that could be really a pitfall if you do it wrong. So let me show you how you should not do it. You do the first iteration, and then you say, okay, let's add 50 new fields, and you're adding that and enabling that, and your data quality report suddenly drops from 95% to 25%. And then you're showing your stakeholders, hey, look, here's the data. People will just freak out and say, look, it's just 25%. I do not trust that data. I can't do decisions. And then you go into argumentations and then, yeah, but the data we're collecting for you, that's still good quality, blah, blah, blah. Forget that stuff. If you go in, be very sensitive of how much additional stuff you can add in what time and what's possible by the organization to collect. If you don't do that well, you will never achieve a data quality which gives enough trust to your stakeholders, and all the efforts, they will be just gone, right? So you need to have iterations. Data collection is iterative. And even for one purpose, for one objective you have to achieve, for one purpose, you could go in and break it up in 5 iterations and say, look, let's get in the basis, the easy data, then go hunt the other ones. And then the higher end questions, data you need to answer, you can go and hunt that information and then make that reality check. Lessons learned, minor iterations will increase the acceptance. And the minor iterations, it's just the amount of the data, and then it is, the time you're giving the people to collect that information is very key. Hope, guys, all that stuff makes sense. So if you have any questions, just drop that. The slides you can have, guys, of course, when you complete the survey at the end. So just be aware of that. Let's talk about the organization. So, and that is a common question we're getting as well, and say, okay, Kadir, everything makes sense. I get it. I have the similar experience, but how do we implement that in the organization? If you start being the chief data officer or chief data quality officer, the CDO should hopefully exist in your organization. But imagine you're creating a chief data quality officer role and say, look, guys, our organization only collects data to answer questions in our organization. You will not get the buy-in. It's too artificial, because there are other portfolio managements and portfolios in place where you are already dealing with some kind of data requirement. The problem is, if you go in and say, let's create an application inventory, a list of applications. Like ServiceNow is a great platform. It has the meta model out of the box. You go and create your list of applications, capabilities, and so on. It's like Lego. You can bring in any field and collect that information very easily. But now what it is missing is a good data quality management practice. And the only way to do that is you have to hook up with portfolio management and make that part of the portfolio management, like your application portfolio management, your business portfolio management, right? You have to make that part of that. So once it is part of that portfolio management board, ideally, which is established and has executive support as well, will align the data collection efforts with the requirements, with the purpose, with the crucial data, and manage the entire community. They have to define as well the processes, the terms and the definitions. So everything will be driven under the wings of that portfolio management board. That portfolio management board is just a few people. It requires a working group. It depends, of course, how complex your organization is. But if you have a federated environment, I would include then the business units or, subgroups, whatever the organizational layer is to split up your organization in different chunks. I called it, for this example, a business unit. A BU is a business unit. I would include that working group, which has the organizational representatives, so which brings as well the needs from a BU perspective. And especially if you're driving architecture from a bottom-up approach and, from an IT perspective, I would doubt that we can call it EA, but most people do it. So then you really need those BU specific people and subject matter experts who can tell you, look, in our BU, in product supply, it's not like IT. There is a different reality, and this is what we need. This is the data which we need to collect to do our forecast for our investments, whatever. That business unit, I would arm them as well, because you're enabling those business unit representative. That person should as well train and motivate the stewards within their organizational unit. Don't try to make it from a portfolio management board or EA function. That will not work. I've tried it. I failed. I had exactly a BO unit who owned 80% of the applications. His name was Bruno. Yeah, I'm coming up with the real names now. So Bruno told me, hey, Kadir, your slides are too nice. Just use bullet points. Don't make them too sexy. So I said, okay, what's the real reason? He said, look, you're making all those concepts, but my people have to work on it. I said, what? It's for your business, value, it's for your advantage. It took us a couple of months to figure it out that what we try to do is really beneficial, right? So it is those conversations you can avoid by hooking up with the right people. And, scope could mean as well, just focus on a business unit for now and then get the success and then show it to the other business units so you can onboard them into that portfolio management and working group idea. So it's very important. And when you do that, you ultimately have to be able to report the data quality for that specific BU as well, and not just, all the data at once. And that working group member for that specific organizational area will establish a steward community for their validity of data. They will establish a stewardship concept to complete the missing data, regularly review the data, and to verify so we have correct data within the portfolio. So another lessons learned was anchor data quality management in portfolio management. Guys, there is no tool which can facilitate that. It's an organizational challenge. It's a process challenge. Whoever tells you the opposite, forget it. But as Inspire, we have created the tool to exactly support that process and that mindset so that it is easier for you. So there is another angle of this, guys. It's the maturity model on the stewardship. So if you go in and look, I have one application, or I'm a steward. I'm an application owner, application steward, IT steward, whatever you call it, custodian. And I'm responsible for 10 applications. So you can go in and say, all the fields, all the crucial fields we have, that person is responsible to maintain. You can do that. And I think it's a very wise starting point to do that, because it will help you to establish the stewardship and ask the people to complete the data. You have one responsible, which you can blame as well. It's not blaming, guys. It's more making somebody accountable to make sure that the data is there. And if they need somebody else to ask to complete that data, it will simplify the process. The second option is that you have a group of stewards. That means I have still one application, but it's not one person who's responsible for all the data. Excuse me. It is multiple people. Like I have somebody from security comes in and provides the security data. I have somebody from a platform team giving that, or compliance, you get it. So it is multiple people contributing to the same asset, to the same configuration item, element, whatever you call it, and provide that information. Both has pros and cons. So the pro here is with the left one is there is minimum administration effort. It simplifies when you go into the market with this data quality management, it will help you. The downside is there is a risk of poor data quality because you force them to enter data, do something. They don't have much time, and they will just enter something which could be a problem, and it is a problem. The other approach, you will get high data quality because it's verified by the subject matter experts, but you have a specific additional organizational overhead because suddenly you have to fight political things because involving the IT security people, they will say, oh, why should I do that? That was never my job, right? So it is something you have to try to balance, but you will mature over time into level 2, and that is the ultimate goal, to split up and make a community of stewards contributing to different sets of data. So we're coming slowly to the end. I have still a lot of slides, guys. So I will make it short. Enabling the steward is one of the top results of the poll as well. How do we do that? So be aware of two facts. Number one, happy employees experience 31% higher productivity at work. That is awesome, isn't it? So we need to find a way to motivate the employees and the stewards to do that. And there are two very interesting articles. They're a little bit older, but it's still valid. The other thing is 13% of the employees are not really, well, are the ones which are engaged at work. Only 13%. The others don't care. They don't really want to work. And we had some analysis at that time as I was working, especially in IT. The efficiency of the IT team was 40% of every employee, right? 20% of people in an organization, a big organization, they basically quit internally. They don't want to work. 20% at that time was, here it is 13%, are really the key people who are making the difference. And then you have everything in between. So when you go into data quality management and collecting data, be aware of those facts. The problem is really to find, you will face all range, the different 5 types of people and stewards, you will face them, and you need to motivate them. First of all, get a clear and visible executive sponsorship on a C-level executive and then on a BU level executive sponsorship as well. Otherwise, don't start it. It will not work. Second is show the purpose and the value contribution people can bring in. If you make me part of a superior story and say, look, what you do here and the data you contribute, Kadir, will help us in the merger and acquisition or the divestiture, you are key part of this success. I want to be part of the story, right? Make that part of their personal performance. Give them some rewards, some benefits. Otherwise, why shall I add some data for Ricarda because she asked for? I like her, but come on, I have 1,000 other things to do. I'm working 120%. It's the same everywhere. You know, I don't have time. And if you look into their performance, they're just contributing 40% to your environment. It's everywhere the same. And simplify data maintenance. That is the tool decision. That's the tool thing, you know, and as well as correspondence as well with the amount of data you have. And hopefully in the next webinar, we will show you exactly how a sexy UI can look like, you know, to maintain the data. Collecting the data has a high cost, has a very high cost. So minimize the effort. And you should as well automate the collection as much as possible. Nevertheless, nobody can tell you what capabilities are provided by an application, for instance, you know, that will be maintained manually. There will be always data which needs to be maintained manually. So even if the purpose is huge, try to minimize the effort by keeping the data amount as low as possible. Publishing it, there are different angles as well. There are the stewards, the subject matter experts, the portfolio managers, the stakeholders and decision makers, and so on. There is a lot of, you know, different levels of interest groups who needs to make decisions, and the outcomes, the reports you have to provide, they must be on different levels, on a field level, on an element, on a portfolio element level, and as well on a contextual level, just giving the BU units, marketing, sales, supply chain, that data quality report they need. There will be some examples in the next webinar, hopefully as well. So the other lessons learned is show the data quality everywhere. As I started to implement my first application portfolio management, on the landing page, I had, you know, two pie charts showing exactly the data quality about the portfolio. That helped me as well to make some pressure on the executive level to say, look, guys, as long as you do not deliver the data, our data quality will not improve. So we have 2 minutes left, guys. So here are some process hints. If you ask for the slide deck, you will get it. Those are basically the challenging questions you should ask yourself, not only initially, those are the questions you should ask basically every time. It will help you to keep you grounded and challenge yourself as well. Because when you're talking to your stakeholders and have the executive pressure, I know you will just add 50 additional fields, but don't do that. Challenge it. Here is a quick sum up, guys. What you should do. I think we should take that minute to do it. We said in the beginning, there is no purpose, so ergo no value. You know, identify the real purpose, why you're collecting the data. It's really very essential. That's your starting point. Just having the data has no value. Don't boil the ocean. Maintain only the required data to answer that business question. That's very key. The data is out of date during your collection. Even if we verify and do the data, the time frame is essential. Some data you will just do once a year or quarterly. You will review the data. You need that agile review verification process where you can do ad hoc challenges and so on as well. Something we will show you in the solution. The regularly reviewed and verified data has the value, high value. So guys, that goes again, establish a golden source of truth and share that in your environment. And keep in mind, integration doesn't help here that much. So try to have everything in a single source. The meta model has limited value, we said that, or it doesn't have value by itself. The meta model is a result of your data requirements. That's it. Data requirements change over time. We said that. Consider the life cycle stages. Do incremental iterations. And so that doesn't break the neck of your steward. It makes you more reliable. And then additionally, you will add, successively additional information on top of your data quality and remove the things which don't make sense. Anchor data quality management in the portfolio management with the working group and the BUs. That is really key to success. And then, motivate the stewards, get the executive stewardship and so on, and share that success, guys, because the collection of the data has a very high cost. So, and then do reporting, do the good things, make your stewards part of the story, the BU, the working group members as well, part of the story, and make that data quality accessible to everyone. So guys, hope that all makes sense. We will skip the questions. We will come back to your questions. I've seen there are a lot of questions which you have raised. We'll follow up with you guys. You will have a final chance as well in the survey. So with that said, guys, I'm handing over to Ricarda and hope it was a little bit entertaining and all made sense. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kadir. Thanks for the session. So here you can see again, this webinar was sponsored by Sofa Summit. So big thank you again to you, Philip, for organizing this and for sponsoring us here. And for everyone else who joined us today, thank you very much. And we hope this was an insightful webinar for you. If you have any questions, here you can see our contact details. Just take a screenshot and reach out to us at any time. And yeah, don't forget the survey in the end. And it was nice talking to you guys. Have a very nice rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.